Hello, friends. This werewolf is not dangerous. No, he is very dangerous. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. The only reason I'm posting this is to collect my thoughts and to rationalize all the unbelievable things that have happened to me over the last 12 hours. Believe it or not, it's up to you, but this is the story of how I found myself trapped in someone else's life. This morning, I woke up in someone else's bed. And don't mean get wasted at a party and wake up God knows where. No. It was like I'd been picked up and dropped into the life of a complete stranger. After figuratively pulling myself together, I took a good long look at my surroundings. From what I gathered, they were in high schools, like me, but the similarities ended there. The room was completely different. Different walls. Different stuff. Different memories. There were photos of people I've never met, clothes I've never owned strewn over the floor, and banners of sports teams I'd never even heard of pinned up on the walls. I was never much of a sporting person. There was a knock at the door and the sound of a woman's voice. "John? You awake?" I was so startled by my new surroundings that her question barely registered with me and I forgot to answer. "You okay in there?" she repeated. There was an audible tone of concern in her voice. "Yeah, I'm good." My voice felt unfamiliar and alien. I heard her give a small sigh of relief. "Well, breakfast will be ready soon, so make sure you're dressed." "Okay." I heard her walk off downstairs. Feeling almost numb with shock and confusion, I got up out of bed and headed to the wardrobe. I threw on some jeans and a plain white shirt and stepped out of my room. At one end of the hall, there was a staircase. At the other was a series of doors. A bathroom, some kind of walk-in closet, an unmarked door, and one with the name Molly written in bright pink feathers. I went left, down the stairs. When I opened the door to the kitchen, I was greeted by a sight that most people would have found to be very mundane. But to me, it was terrifying. Two complete strangers turned and smiled at me. One, a middle-aged woman, who I assumed was my mum, was partway through making a sandwich. The other, young girl no older than 10 or 11, was merrily munching through a bowl of cereal. I assumed this was Molly. "Good morning," I said weakly, sitting down opposite Molly. She furrowed her brow. "You look pale." I felt my forehead. "I'm good." A plate of scrambled eggs and toast was placed in front of me by the mum. "I'm sure you're just hungry," she said. "Yeah, probably." I ate in silence and observed my surroundings. Molly kept looking at me, staring at me, so I tried to avoid her gaze by looking around the room. Lazily sat atop an ironing board was something that can only be described as one of God's cruel jokes. Its eyes were freakishly close to its mouth. Its teeth were sticking out of its mouth in all directions. Most of its greasy black hair had fallen out and it was down in ear. "Is that a cat?" I mumbled. "John!" Molly shouted. "Don't be mean to Garfield." I choked on my eggs. "Garfield? It's not even orange." Molly glared at me. She turned to the ironing board and tapped her legs to get its attention. "Come here, Garfield," she said softly. The cat jumped down from his spot and walked over to Molly. She picked it up and began petting it. "What happened to its ear?" She looked at me confused. "What? He's never had an ear." Mom sat down next to us. "Are you feeling okay, John?" she asked. "You seem a million miles away." I had no idea how to respond. How could I possibly tell them the truth? What even was the truth? Was this my life? Had my other life been some form of a dream? My previous life, my real, when I was Thomas and not John, was already beginning to feel fake. It's like when you wake up after a dream and then an hour later you can only remember snippets of it. Until, eventually, you're not even sure it even happened. No, I'm good, I'm good. Mom glanced at the clock. You should go grab your bag. Ryan will be here soon. I nodded and got up, despite having no idea who Ryan was. As I left the kitchen I caught Molly staring at me. She gave me chills. I headed up to my room, grabbed my bag along with a few other things I might need, wallet, phone, etc., and headed back downstairs. Mom was stood by the front door. See you later, sweetie. See you. Stood at the far end of the driveway was a boy about my age. He was looking at his phone and tapping his hand against his leg impatiently. I assumed this was the aforementioned Ryan. As I was walking toward him he looked up and waved. You took your sweet-ass time, he said, smiling. Sorry about that. I gestured for him to walk in front. Since I had no idea where I was going, I figured I'd just follow him and eventually I'd end up at the school. We began walking in awkward silence. It was at that point I realized something. I pulled my wallet and phone out from my pockets and began going through them. Inside the wallet were a provisional license and about $10. The license said my name was John Palmer, 17 and from Texas. I checked the phone and, luckily, there wasn't a password. From a minute or so of searching through that, I discovered a few more details. I attend Dewis High School. Dewis is the name of the town. I've apparently known the guy next to me, Ryan, for a very long time. Like since kindergarten. There was another friend, Sophie. Like Ryan, it appeared I'd known her since kindergarten too. We were all in a group chat too, named the Original Three. The Photos app was filled with all the usual things. Pictures of me, Ryan and Sophie, a few shots from a football game, a couple of memes and some pictures of math equations scrawled on a piece of paper, which I assumed was some bygone homework. Just normal, everyday things. I felt Ryan slap me on the back. You seem pretty quiet today, John. You feeling alright? Yeah, I'm good, I replied, trying not to wince. It was surprisingly hard. You get up on the wrong side of the bed this morning? Yeah, something like that. I looked up and saw a girl at the corner of an intersection, waving at us. I recognized her from the pictures. It was Sophie. Morning, Sophie. Hey, John, she said, smiling. Ryan said something to her and they got chatting. I followed behind in silence, checking my phone for more clues. I didn't find much. When we got to school, we all went our separate. Since no one tried to speak to me during classes, I kept to myself. It was best that way. I didn't want to run the risk of being asked questions I couldn't answer. I met back up with the other two at lunch. We talked as we ate and, from them, I gathered more and more information through context clues. Now, this is all nice and spooky, but it wasn't until after classes when I headed back to my locker to drop some stuff off, I had to ask Ryan what the combination was, that the first truly weird thing happened. Some point in between checking my locker for the first time this morning and checking it in the afternoon, someone had put something in it. It wasn't a prank or anything like that. No. It was a book. A book on myths and legends. And on the contents page, a chapter called Lycanthropes was circled in red pen. Now, this was pretty strange, but it pales compared to what I saw when I was walking back home. For whatever reason, Sophie and Ryan weren't walking the same way as me, so I went back alone. Part of the route goes through a small wooded area. It wasn't a rough or completely remote, but since it went out of the way of the residential area, it was pretty quiet. Now, as I was walking through, a rabbit walked out from underneath a bush and crossed the path in front of me. Now, when I say walk, I don't mean moved around on all fours like a normal rabbit. No, this thing was bipedal. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw it. When it was halfway across the path, it turned its head towards me and things got even weirder. Nice evening, isn't it? I just nodded at the talking rabbit and wondered if I was in some sort of fever dream. After escaping Wonderland, I went straight home. So far today we've had waking up in someone else's life, mysterious books, and a talking rabbit. But it gets worse. Or maybe better. Anyway, 2 more things have happened this evening. The first one was while we were eating dinner. The radio was on in the background and the news came on at 7. Tonight's top story: the mysterious deaths of cattle and other livestock continues as 3 sheep were found mutilated at a farm yesterday evening in the local area. Forensic evidence matches that gathered from the other attacks, and police believe that a pack of wolves or wild dogs may be behind the killings. More information as it develops. Now, over to Tom for the sports. All these things are all tied together, right? Well, maybe not the rabbit, but the other 2 certainly are. The mysterious book and the animal attacks, it's all about dogs, right? Dogs and wolves and stuff? Was it a coincidence? I didn't think so. And I happened to be right. When I went back upstairs to my room, I saw something half pushed under the door. It was a letter, and quite a fancy looking one too. It was written on old-fashioned looking parchment in fancy cursive script. It read, "Hello John. Or perhaps I should call you Thomas. You are probably wondering what you are doing here. All will be revealed in time. But first, I need you to do something for me. This town has a problem and I need you to fix it. You'll know what to do. Good luck." I'd be lying if I said I wasn't having fun. Spooky letters, talking rabbits, random books and a sheep-based murder mystery. I'm loving it. I know earlier I said I was scared when I woke up, and I was. But I had a shit life. I grew up in a children's home. And I'm 17. I had only had 1 year left, and who really would want to adopt a teenager? So, let's put everything together. Mysterious book on wolves plus animal attacks plus letter telling me I need to fix some problem. I think I have to kill a werewolf. I'll post something soon. I already have this thing planned out. Me, Ryan and Sophie, we're gonna go camping. We're gonna kill a werewolf and I'm gonna have the time of my life. And do you know why? Because I have nothing left to live for and it feels incredible. Hello, my scary friends. Oh no. I disappear, no. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Growing up here, I was always greeted by friendly people. Everyone said hi and waved to each other. You had your neighbors over on Sunday after church for a barbecue and everyone had a good time. Of course, being a kid, I was very curious and would explore while my parents were visiting with people from church. One afternoon, my friends and I played hide and seek. I had the bright idea to sneak down to the southern part of my neighborhood, which was run down. The farther and farther I got from my house, the darker the road became due to the foliage above blocking out the sun. The paved street turned to a dirt road, white picket fence turned into overgrown yards and abandoned houses. I found a hiding spot underneath an old pickup truck with weeds growing through the bed and cab. I was invisible to the naked eye. About 10 minutes passed and I could barely make out the conversations and laughter several houses down at the barbecue, as well as the screaming and commotion whenever one of my friends was found. Behind me, I heard a stick break, but I didn't dare look. It was probably my friend Clay trying to find me. Suddenly 2 denim-clad legs appeared in front of my face. Barefoot but far too hairy to be any of my friends. I kept quiet. As the knees bent, I was met with an older man with 2 different colored eyes. "What in the Sam hell are you doing down the bar?" "I'm hiding from my friends," I managed to reply. I crawled out from under the truck and realized I had never seen this man ever before. I was taught at a young age to have exceptional manners and introduced myself. The old man asked me if I wanted to come back to his house, enticing me with his recipe of homemade cornbread. Again, I retained my manners and kindly refused. Instead of being persistent, the old man nodded and told me to go and play with my friends. By this time Clay saw me and started to head over. I walked towards him while motioning the timeout signal. "Why ain't you hiding?" he exclaimed. I told Clay how I was hiding until some man found me, and I pointed back, but the man was gone, nowhere to be found. As Clay was pestering me, claiming I stopped the game because I couldn't find a good hiding spot, I was staring at the old truck where I was hiding. The grass and weeds were much too thick that even standing here glaring at where I had been, I wouldn't be able to see myself. How did that man ever manage to see me? I finally convinced Clay that what happened was true, but Ryan and Jacob or even Bo didn't seem to believe me or really care too much. Clay and I saw the man again, but this time he was walking down the dirt road on the south side of the neighborhood and walked into one of the houses we had always assumed was vacant. We had to investigate. The big cottonwood outside the house had squirrel bones stuck to the trunk, as well as a reflective light like you'd find on a bicycle nailed to either side. The man's house had a ripped screen door, as well as 2 big moths that crawled the wall by a cracked window. "I can't believe he lives here," Clay whispered. "Where did he come from anyway?" I asked. We turned around facing the dirt road. It was a no-outlet road, and in the end, there was a fence that read "No trespassing." Of course, 2 kids, we trespassed. As we climbed over the fence, a chill ran down my spine. Dread filled my ever-being, but I didn't want to seem like a wuss to Clay, so I manned up and kept my composure. Through the trees and thickets, we found a tattered old house that looked like it had been hit by the tornado a few years back. Next to it, an old shed with a broken-out window. On the ground around it looked like blood. Was it paint? Blood? From an animal? Back far there was a railroad track, and past that the other side of town, so we decided to go back to Clay's house. I could tell Clay also wanted to leave as much as I did. Fall swept in, bringing with it the sweet aroma of dead leaves and crisp morning air. It was still warm, but much more bearable than the summer. School had started, so playing with my neighborhood friends became something of a rarity, only hanging out on weekends or if we finished our homework at night. We had always enjoyed catching lightning bugs or playing in the treehouse at night, but this particular fall all of our parents would usually limit how often we went over to each other's houses. The Southern Plains area of the US is notorious for its human trafficking, but the autumn of 2004 was something else entirely. It all started when a kid from the west side went missing. The police simply thought the kid got lost, but when they started their investigation, the trail went cold. The next week, a Baptist church down a couple of blocks away from our road was having a fundraiser. 2 children from there also went missing. Was there some sort of connection? At night I could swear I heard some sort of howling, followed by all of the dogs in my neighborhood barking. My father dismissed it, telling me I was hearing coyotes and that there weren't any wolves in Kansas. I knew what coyotes sounded like. We often encountered them while hunting. Parents do their best to keep their children from finding out how terrible the world can be. Their attempt was futile on the night of October 23rd. I was playing at Clay's house, along with my friend Ryan and Bo. He had quite the collection of toys, both new and hand-me-downs from his older brother. At around 9 p.m. Clay's parents get a call and we hear footsteps coming towards the top of the stairs. Which one of our parents wants us home? Who's the first to go? Jacob, your father wants you to come home now, proclaimed Clay's mom. We all froze and exchanged glances, making sure we didn't miss Jacob, as if he had been under our noses the entire time. What? Hollered Clay. Apparently he has a test tomorrow morning, answered Clay's dad. My stomach sank. Us four boys met Clay's mom at the stairs. Jacob never came over. Jacob isn't here, we all muttered. Clay's mom gave us a stern look of disapproval, thinking we were pranking her, before her face gave way to a horrific grimace. She picked the phone back up off the hook, dialing back Jacob's parents. Through the phone, down the stairs, I could still hear the petrified voice of Jacob's mom. Police asked us questions if Jacob had told us about any people he recently met, the last time any of us spoke to him, etc. They asked if we had seen anything strange recently, to which we had all seen the strange man, so we told the investigators about him. Well, even if we knew where he lived, we don't know if he's the one behind this. Clay and I told the officer what house he was living in. Son. The officer was looking at Clay. No one's lived in that house for years, it's abandoned. The investigator told our parents they'd keep an eye out for a man who matched our description. The cops didn't seem too genuine about it though, so it's a good thing Clay and I didn't mention anything else like the creepy shed, plus we weren't supposed to be back there in the first place. Halloween, a time of pretend spookiness and celebrating with candy, was instead filled with absolutely terrified families and mourning parents. Across the town, more kids had never returned with sacks full of candy. The investigation was stepped up, and the police had suspected, but one after the other they all were cleared. Hunting season had taken my mind off of the recent tragedy. It was hard to tell, but my father was quite uneasy about this whole ordeal. It was almost like he was taking me out into the wilderness to keep me safe. We'd go hunting quite a bit, me and him. One night my father and I were heading back home. In the rear view mirror I saw a beautiful sunset, the pond mirroring it, and the branches blowing in the stiff breeze. Maybe this whole thing will just pass over, I thought, still missing Jacob. When I got home I saw police lights flickering, and the cops outside of Clay's house. No. I cried out loud. My father and mother embraced me as Clay's parents embraced each other, empty inside. It's been 15 years since that fall, and this all still remains a mystery. Hello, my friends. Hey skeleton, where are you? Alright, be cool, be cool. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. If anyone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be hunting down and decapitating werewolves, I would have asked them what they had been smoking. You see, I often find myself awestruck by how much has changed in such a short time. On that fateful day 2 years ago, my life was irreversibly intertwined with the fate of the backwoods of southwest Georgia. My husband and I had moved from the center of a major city to the outskirts of the county in order to get out of the stab zone, as we called it. We lived in an apartment that was known as a hotspot for illegal activity and murder. On top of all of this, the maintenance men were sketchy. One I knew for certain was a registered sex offender, and the other one never knocked before letting himself into our apartment. His antics prompted me to adopt a large dog from the local pound. My apologies, I'm rambling. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah. We just moved to the edge of the county. We now lived so far out into the boondocks that the only option for the internet was a satellite service. For two people who spent more time than the average person on the internet, it was quite the adjustment, especially given that we had a bandwidth limit that if we reached it our speed would be drastically throttled to a crawl. The funny thing about not having easily accessed internet is that you start to notice things in your environment that you'd otherwise be distracted from. One such detail we started to pick up on was the fact that no one stayed in the area for long. Within months of us living there, we saw for sale signs popping up in dozens of yards. Weird, but people move all the time. Hell, we just moved. We would joke that they were the weak ones that had to escape to faster internet. Little did we know just how far off we were about the area. It seemed to be around the 6th month of living in the new home that we started to hear the howling at night. My dog would go crazy and hide under the covers on the bed. For reference, he's a 100 pounds plus pit bull mix. Every night when it started. When we'd first moved in, we had noticed that every outside security light had been shot with a BB gun or broken as if ripped from the siding. It was only after the first couple of nights when the howling started to be accompanied by what sounded like several large animals circling our house that we regretted not replacing them immediately. Now I've lived in the country my entire life practically, so the howling wasn't a concern to me, but I did worry for my dog's safety when on walks and going out to relieve himself. I started to bring my shotgun with me at night when I took him out for his nightly walk. It was only the third day of doing this when I ran into trouble. We were about 30 yards away from the house when howling erupted from the trees all around us, giving the effect of it coming from multiple sources and one simultaneously. I don't scare easily, but I won't lie. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up on end. Even though I had my 16 gauges with me, I didn't like the odds of me versus whatever was doing the howling. It sounded a lot bigger than a coyote. Whilst I was spooked, I knew better than to turn my back and just run with my dog and hope for the best. Instead, I began the tense backtrack to my house. I tried to keep my back to the house and whatever it was in front of me based on the sounds it was making. It's safe to say that by the time my dog and I made it to the house, he had tugged so hard on his leash that he was coughing. He was desperate to get inside as soon as possible, and I was on board with that sentiment. I didn't delay, but as I closed the door I took one last glimpse towards the tree line. There in the moonlight stood something my brain struggled to explain. The concept of a dog man or werewolf. It was foreign and had threatened to break my grasp on reality in those brief seconds before I slammed the door shut and locked it. Needless to say, my husband was looking at me as if I were crazy, and when I started to explain to him what I had seen, I started to think he was right. His consoling consisted of suggesting that maybe it was a bear. A deputy that lived down the road from us had said that he'd seen bears in the woods, all the way to thinking maybe our neighbors had wanted to play a prank on us. To catch you all up on what sort of neighbors we had, the ones on the right side abused their dogs and children. I had called the cops on them once for hitting their son in the front yard so hard that his nose was bleeding. Ever since I'd called the cops on them anytime we were outside doing yard work or what have you, the mother would come out and scream obscenities and threats at us. She never acted on those words. Thankfully, the neighbors on the left side kept to themselves mostly. My only interaction with them has been when I was picking blackberries with my dog at my side. The sun had recently gone down and I was using a flashlight to navigate the thorny bushes. During my absent-minded harvesting, one of the neighbors from the left had wandered up to the property line. I knew they'd been drinking all day and into the evening since they'd been loud and obnoxious. This guy took his flashlight and shined it through the small line of trees and said, "I see you. What the fuck are you doing?" As if I was on his property or something, when in all reality he was making his way onto our property with a flashlight in my face. I shouted at him to get the fuck off my property. I'm lucky that my harsh words stunned him and he simply stumbled back, drunkenly reporting to his relatives what happened, no doubt embellishing to make himself look good. I know you're probably wondering why all of the backstory, and that none of this seems to have anything to do with decapitating werewolves. To that sentiment, I say every good story needs a strong beginning and foundation. I need you, dear readers, to understand the climate of the street I lived on in order for you to later understand the desperation that would bring us all together to fight off certain death that the Glen werewolf problem posed upon our existence. Now I know the beginning of this story hasn't been all that interesting so far, but when I return I will dive into when the action and terror truly began,